Imagine a world without highways, without airplanes, without the endless hum of industry. Now imagine the one substance that made it all possible. It wasn't steel, it wasn't coal, it was oil. And once America struck black gold, nothing would ever be the same. In 1859, a man named Edwin Drake drilled the first successful oil well in Titusville, Pennsylvania. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, most people thought he was a fool. Drilling for oil was considered a reckless gamble, and previous attempts had been nothing but failures. Drake was hired by the Seneca Oil Company to find a reliable way to extract oil from the ground, but he lacked formal engineering experience. Using an old steam-powered rig, he faced constant setbacks, broken drills, collapsing wells, and financial struggles. Locals mocked his efforts, calling his project Drake's Folly. At the time, America's energy sources were wood, coal, and whale oil. Wood was abundant but inefficient for large-scale industry. Coal was the dominant fuel, powering steam engines in factories and locomotives. But it was dirty and cumbersome to transport. Whale oil, used primarily for lighting, was expensive and increasingly difficult to obtain as whale populations dwindled due to overhunting. People desperately needed a new, reliable source of fuel, but no one imagined it would come from beneath the ground in liquid form. On August 27, 1859, after months of struggle, Drake's well struck oil at a depth of 69 feet. Black liquid gushed to the surface, proving that oil could be extracted in large quantities. It was a moment that changed history. Almost overnight, the small town of Titusville transformed into a bustling oil boomtown. Prospectors, entrepreneurs, and fortune seekers flooded the area, eager to capitalize on this newfound resource. Oil fever had begun. Initially, oil's primary use was kerosene for lamps, replacing whale oil and making lighting cheaper and more accessible. Demand skyrocketed, and refineries quickly emerged to process crude oil into kerosene. The process also produced other byproducts, one of which was gasoline. At the time, gasoline was considered a waste product, often discarded because there was no practical use for it. No one realized that in just a few decades, it would become the most valuable fuel in the world. As industry expanded in the late 1800s, factories, railroads, and machines needed lubrication, and petroleum provided the perfect solution. Before petroleum-based lubricants, machinery relied on animal fats and vegetable oils, which were inconsistent and broke down quicker under high heat and pressure. Petroleum lubricants were far superior, allowing machines to run faster and last longer, boosting industrial productivity. At first, oil was just one of many resources feeding America's industrial growth. Coal still powered steam engines, and steel was revolutionizing construction. But then came a man who saw oil's real potential, not just as a product, but as the foundation of a vast empire. John D. Rockefeller didn't invent oil refining, but he perfected it. In 1870, he founded Standard Oil, and within a few decades, he controlled around 90% of the oil industry. How? Ruthless efficiency. He bought out competitors, struck secret deals with railroads for cheaper shipping, and vertically integrated his operations to control every step of the process, from drilling to refining to distribution. Standard Oil didn't just refine oil, it controlled pipelines, storage facilities, and even retail sales. He made oil cheaper, more available, and more essential than ever. With Rockefeller's empire growing, oil wasn't just about kerosene anymore. Factories once dependent on steam and coal started integrating oil for lubrication and fuel. Industrial machines ran smoother and faster. Railroads, the lifeblood of American commerce, began using oil-based lubricants, reducing wear and tear on metal components. Oil was making industry more efficient, and efficiency means profit. Then came a game changer no one saw coming: gasoline. Initially, it was considered a waste product of refining kerosene, often dumped into rivers or burned off. But that all changed with the rise of the automobile. Henry Ford's Model T, introduced in 1908, needed fuel, and gasoline was the perfect fit. Suddenly, oil wasn't just an industrial lubricant or lighting solution, it was the key to an entirely new form of transportation. American roads, economy, and entire way of life shifted as cars became more accessible. And as automobiles took over, gasoline demand skyrocketed, cementing oil as the most valuable commodity in the country. Oil wasn't just fueling cars, it was fueling America's expansion. In Texas, the Spindletop Gusher of 1901 proved that the U.S. had massive oil reserves, leading to an oil boom that transformed the state. Entrepreneurs flooded the market, and American oil production exploded. This boom fed not just automobiles, but also shipping, agriculture, and manufacturing. By the 1920s, oil was powering trucks, tractors, and even airplanes. America was no longer just an industrial nation, it was a mechanized one, moving faster than ever before. When World War I erupted, oil became a weapon. The war proved that modern militaries needed oil. Tanks, trucks, and airplanes all ran on petroleum, and the US had plenty of it. The ability to produce and transport oil efficiently gave America and its allies a strategic advantage. By the end of the war, the world understood that oil wasn't just a commodity, it was a necessity for power, both economic and military. Post-war, America's dependence on oil only deepened. The Roaring '20s saw an explosion of consumer goods, many of which were made possible by petroleum. The plastics industry emerged, creating everything from radios to packaging. Road construction boomed as cars became more common. America was evolving into an oil-fueled society, and Rockefeller's empire had set the stage for an economic revolution. The Great Depression slowed growth, but oil wasn't going anywhere. By the time World War II arrived, oil was more crucial than ever. The war was fought with oil-powered machines, tanks, battleships, and bombers, and the country with the most oil would have the upper hand. The US ramped up production, supplying not just its own military, but also the Allied forces. By the war's end, oil had cemented itself as the backbone of industrial and military power. After the war, oil powered America's golden age. President Eisenhower's interstate highway system, built in the 1950s, was designed with oil in mind. Cars, trucks, and industry needed efficient roads. Suburban expansion exploded, with homes, shopping centers, and entire communities designed around car culture. Meanwhile, oil wasn't just fueling engines, it was fueling innovation. The petrochemical industry gave rise to synthetic rubber, fertilizers, and countless industrial materials that shaped modern life. By the 1970s, America had built an economy entirely dependent on oil. It powered all of its factories, transportation, and everyday life. But with this dependence came vulnerability, as seen in the oil crises of the decade. Yet even as energy debates raged, one thing remained clear: oil had transformed America into the industrial powerhouse it was. From Rockefeller's Standard Oil monopoly to Ford's automobiles and the war machines of the 20th century, oil didn't just change industry, it reshaped the entire country. It didn't start the Industrial Revolution, but oil made America's industrial dominance possible. It turned a growing nation into a superpower, fueled expansion, and accelerated progress in ways no one could have imagined when Edwin Drake struck that first well in Pennsylvania. And while the world's relationship with oil continues to evolve, its role in shaping America's industrial past is undeniable.